Hi friends, I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to another Collage with Me video. I brought out my quote art journal again. I'm slowly moving the saved quotes from post-it notes into this journal. In this video, I'll be adding this quote from Salvador Dali. The quote reads, "Have no fear of perfection, you'll never reach it." I think this is something good to remember, especially when creating art. So let's go over the supplies we'll be using. So let's go over the supplies we'll be using. First off, I brought out painted papers, and I'm going to use this to write the quote on since I don't write directly onto the journal. And I'm not sure which pink I'm going to use. So I brought out both, and then I'll decide soon. Then I brought out some altered bleeding tissue paper. And this is going to be used as the collage papers. And I decided to bring the pink, purple, fuchsia color theme to match with the painted papers that's going to be on the quote, that we use for the quote. Then I have matte medium, which I use to glue down the bleeding tissue paper, and a glue stick to glue down the piece of paper that has the quote. Paintbrushes. This is the paintbrush I'll use for the matte medium, and I brought out some other paintbrushes because I might be using some matte acrylic paint as accent colors. I'm not sure I'm going to do that yet. I'm going to wait until the end just to see if it's needed. Then I have various black markers, and I'm going to use these to write the quote. Scissors are good to have. A ruler, a jar of water, paper towels, and I like having a piece of paper behind the page I'm working on in the journal just to protect the other pages in the journal. So let's get started writing the quote. Before we start writing the quote, I wanted to show you the process I went through to come up with the lettering and the design of the quote, and I did that in my sketchbook. I decided it'd be fun and true to the quote to use different fonts, and they're just subtle changes in the fonts. They're not too bold, just writing cursive, writing in all caps with a thicker pen. And as you can see, I thought about writing directly on the bleeding tissue paper, but then I decided it'd be best to write on a solid piece of painted paper and then collage the bleeding tissue paper around it. So that's what we're going to go with. So let's start writing the quote. I might not talk all the way through it since it's hard for me to write and talk at the same time. Brought you in a bit closer so you can see when I'm writing the quote. And also you'll see that I decided to go with the lighter pink painted paper for writing the quote. I think it's going to be a nice contrast with the darker bleeding tissue paper, so it'll read as a nice focal point. The other thing I did, even though I'm freehanding the quote, I gave myself a border on which to write the quote in, just to make sure it's going to fit in the 3" by 2" size. And also I made marks for the lines so I know where to write the quote in each line, just to make sure I have enough space to write the quote and Salvador Dali's name. So with that, I'm going to start writing, and I probably, like I said, not going to talk my way through it. So let's go. So this is our finished quote. I'm going to bring out all the other supplies so we can start collaging it in the art journal. Now the quote is ready to glue into the journal. I'm going to glue it slightly off center so there's room on the page to put the bleeding tissue paper at least 3 of the sides. So I'm just going to put it just slightly over like this and then start building the rest of the collage. Now that the quote is glued down, the next step is to addition the different bleeding tissue paper pieces and to see which will look good against the quote. And we want to keep the quote as the focal point, so I'll probably go a little bit darker with the bleeding tissue paper, just so the quote and the light pink of the quote will stand out. So I'll do that now. And with bleeding tissue paper, you get this nice variation of color. And I want to make sure I have pieces that will represent that nicely. I'm deciding if I want to add a layer that has more of the variation of the colors, and I think I will, because I think it won't take away from the focal point, but it'll add some interest. And I think I'll do the same up at the top as well. And this is the good thing about bleeding tissue paper, that once you layer it, you can see what's underneath and what's on top, and because that has a nice transparent look, and you can just continue to build. I trimmed up the edges a bit, and I'm going to let the matte medium dry, then come back and evaluate to see if I need to add any of the matte acrylic paint. Now that the matte medium and the bleeding tissue paper is dry, I'm going to take another look at this page to see if I need to add any of this matte acrylic paint. And so this is what I'm looking at. I like the contrast from the bleeding tissue paper and the light pink of the quote. And I like this variation down in this area and up in this area. But I still think this page looks a bit plain. So I'm going to use some of this red light matte acrylic paint and some of this pink medium and just add a little bit of detail. So let's do that. The matte acrylic paint is not quite dry yet, but I want to take a moment just to review the page, just to see if I need to add anything at this point. I like that I framed this area with a very loose bit of color of both the pink medium and the red light. And then on the other side, as you probably noticed, I was using just the pink medium first to put down the dots, and it wasn't reading at all. You could not really notice it. So I came back in with the red light. And now you can see, if you look closely, both of the colors. And I like that detail. So both sides of the acrylic paint details are framing the quote. So I think this is good at this stage because you still have the altered bleeding tissue paper adding a detail, and I don't want to overwork it so then you don't read the focal point, which is the quote. Let's let the page dry and then we'll come back for one more look. Now that everything is dry, we're taking one final look to see if we need to add any more details or if it's finished. I like how these very loose, imperfect detailings on either side of the quote frame the quote to keep it as the focal point. I like that there's variation of color in the bleeding tissue paper. I think it's finished. I don't want to add anything else that will distract from the focal point, which is the quote. And I'm happy with the way it turned out. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate you watching. Take care. Bye now.